Boy goes fishing and reels in rare historical artifacts. When Colin and his father returned home, they washed the metal pieces in the sink. Colin couldn't comprehend what he saw once the filth was removed. They were wrapped in shrink wrap, but after they were successfully removed, he could see precisely what they were. Colin felt his heart pounding in his chest. He knew these were illegal, and to add insult to injury, the police arrived on his doorstep an hour later. Colin Anderson was a 10-year-old that spent his time playing video games and hanging out with his friends. However, there was one thing about Colin that was quite unusual. His father had been fishing with Colin since he was little, but it was a little bit different than what most people do. Colin and his father, on the other hand, had no idea what they'd encounter on one of their fishing outings. Colin and his family lived in Florida. The boy and his father would bond over an unusual method of fishing. Magnets would be used instead of regular fishing poles. However, it was not their intention to catch fish, they are fishing for something a bit more valuable. If Colin's dad knew what they were going to find that day, he would have just stayed home. Glenn Anderson, Colin's father, enjoyed exploring the earth with his metal detector. However, this made him question what lies beneath other surfaces. This is how the magnet fishing hobby started. But he had no notion that his boy was about to discover something incredible. The pair searched all over their area to find the perfect spot for their magnet fishing. They found their favorite spot on a bridge over the canal that he and his son enjoy frequently. It was their regular area, and despite Glenn's lack of success, his kid was going to find something soon. Colin's father promised him that they would spend the weekend going magnet fishing. So when the time came around, they woke up at the crack of dawn, excited for the prospects of what they could find. However, they could not leave without their special gear. This gear would attract a lot of attention, but they had no clue that what they were going to discover would catch the eye of the cops. Colin and his father made their way to their regular spot. It was a beautiful morning, and the pair enjoyed their walk. Colin unzipped his bag as soon as they arrived at the bridge and began setting up. He wore a 5-pound magnet on a wide red string around his neck. This was the fishing rod he used. Colin flung his magnet over the bridge and began probing beneath the water's surface. He had done this before with his father, but the usual items they discovered were old soda containers, coins, and occasionally nuts or bolts. Colin suddenly felt his magnet getting heavier than usual. What was it? Colin pulled out his catch and started to inspect his catch. It was a lump of ancient metal, but without washing it up first, he couldn't determine what it was. He set it aside while he continued fishing, but he couldn't believe his fortune when he discovered another object only 10 minutes after the first. Although he could not tell what either was, he did not anticipate that the discovery would cause the police to knock on their door. They spent the rest of the morning trying to find more things, but to no avail. They started walking home, and Colin was eager to clean up the strange metal objects. They'd figure out what they'd uncovered soon enough. Colin remembered finding a number plate once, and he was so excited about it, but he had no idea what he had discovered was far more valuable. Glenn and Colin returned home with their haul and ran the items under the faucet. They were normally already rusty, so more water didn't make a difference. But once he peeled back the shrink wrap they were covered in, Glenn knew what he was looking at. He couldn't believe what his son had stumbled upon. Was it even legal? He knew they were in too deep. The two objects were clearly thrown in the river on purpose, now that Glenn recognized them. They were two shiny rifle parts. It didn't look like they had rusted much due to the shrink wrap that they were covered in. Colin had stumbled upon a startling discovery, but Glenn knew he had to protect his child by reporting their find immediately. Soon the Miami-Dade police arrived at their house, and Glenn gladly handed the weapons over. He wanted nothing to do with them, especially since they didn't have any serial numbers. Thankfully, the police believed his story and took the artifacts from the canal with them as evidence. Glenn knew they were most likely linked to a crime and intentionally thrown in the water. Colin was understanding even for a 10-year-old. He was just happy to have found evidence that would hopefully aid the police in an investigation and link the rifles back to someone. Glenn was proud of his son for his discovery. He told him he'd get him a special treat for his good work and that they could fish again the next weekend. Despite keeping the evidence for a few months, Colin still couldn't forget about them. He asked his father to contact the police and ask them what had happened to the items and the case they were linked to. They haven't been linked to anything, but Colin is hopeful that they will bring someone to justice once they find something.